thank you for coming out on this wintry, cold, snow on the ground evening. I was telling Mr. Simon that I posted on our Facebook page saying, "It's not snowing, please come." And so certainly we are delighted that you're here. Our Justice Mobilization Task Force has been celebrating Black History Month all month. And we've been looking at issues of concern, not just in the Black community, but for the whole community. And we're excited that our own Reverend Laverne Gill is hosting this forum along with Reston, the historic Reston Museum, to talk about what the gifts and the legacy is of African Americans in the city of Reston, in the town of Reston. So we're really glad to hear her talk about. There are lots of things about you all that I don't know, so I'm really excited about that. So I just want to ask the members of the Mobilization Task Force to stand so that we might recognize you. We're glad that you had this on your radar. Thank you. And how fortunate we are to have the founder of Reston here with us tonight. And so, Mr. Simon, we're very blessed. I want to invite Reverend Gill to come forward and let's get us started here.
Thank you, Reverend Joan. Bell-Haynes. It is a pleasure for me to be here tonight. Even though this is my church home, it's a pleasure to be able to do this project here. And we're here tonight just to acknowledge and talk about the history of Reston, but also the history of those who came here early on and have come since, who made it comfortable for those of us who came later to enjoy the cultural aspects of Reston that we can appreciate from our own history and our own legacy. And so I just want to say thank you for this opportunity for this forum. I'm not going to talk very long. You'll have an opportunity to see some clips from Reston's African American Legacy Program. It's a program that I started in June of last year. I have not gotten everybody, so if you're not in it, it's only because I haven't gotten to you. But this is a particularly nice clip. This is the clip that shows all of those members of United Christian Parish who've made a difference in the life in Reston. And so I know that those of you who are here will enjoy seeing your friends and learning a little bit more about them as you go through those clips. I want to also thank in advance Deanna Miller, who's my production assistant, who could not be here tonight. And Jerry has been just wonderful. She got sick, and I was just at a loss. So I'm so glad that Jerry is here. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura. Laura Thomas, many of you already know her. Probably better than I do, because she's been an educator and a person of note here in Reston for many, many years. And so I'm going to turn it over to her because she's going to introduce this wonderful panel, and we're going to listen to them and also have some Q&A. And then we'll have an opportunity to see the clips from Reston's African American Legacy Program. And then we'll have an opportunity to dialogue. And I think we want to dialogue about not only the past but the future and where we go from here. And so these young people are here to let us know what it's like to be in Reston now, as opposed to those old folks like me who have old stories to tell. They may have some new stories, or they may have old stories with new twists. Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I think you picked up my...
I'm off the cuff.
nowadays I'm almost always the oldest person in the room. And so I take the,
Except for Bob.
I stand corrected. It's wonderful for me not to be the oldest person. Anyway, and I'm thrilled to see you, and I have to say before I introduce all these people who are young and bright and know so many things, the story of my coming to Reston, I came a long time ago too. And when I came to Reston, I came reluctantly. I really wanted to stay in DC, but I couldn't find a decent school for our kids in an area that we could afford to live. I was afraid to come to Virginia because I felt that my children and my husband and I would not be welcome in Virginia. We were not welcome in Maryland, for sure. And I was a girl from the Bronx, and those of you who have been there recognize that it's dramatically different from Reston. And so I came reluctantly. My husband suggested I come out here. He's really a lot more intellectual and understanding of the higher things in life than I am. We came out here to Reston, and I got here after a long trip and was given a brochure to go still further to where the houses were. Because I came to Lake Anne, and they were just starting to build houses in Hunter's Woods, which was far and dark. And my husband said, "Laura, we'll be fine. Look at all the trees." At any rate, thank you. Thank you for the difference that you really made in my family's life, and for being a wonderful port in the storm for our family. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful to be part of this evening. And this evening, you should know, is a combined effort of the United Christian Parish and Reverend Laverne Gill's research, which is important to recognize, because if you lose the information, you lose more than just the information. You lose the spirit of the time and the essence of what we have become. The efforts of the Reston Historic Trust and Museum are what brought me to this. And as an aside, I would like to mention that they also bring, among other wonderful things, the three divas. And I was a little discomforted because it didn't happen. I certainly hope that somebody will tell me when that's going to happen again very, very soon. That is really part of our
Spring. Spring.
In this endless winter, I'm not sure spring will Our panelists have graciously agreed to share their perspectives of Reston, what it was, what it is, and perhaps even what our dreams might be for our shared Reston. I want to introduce our four panelists. Asia.
Hi.
Tell us what grade you're in. What are your academic goals? Do you have interests outside the classroom?
Okay, so hi, my name is Asia White, and I'm a senior at South Lakes High School. I'm ready to graduate, of course, and I hope to go to James Madison and study international business and hopefully travel the world.
It sounds wonderful. Has South Lakes been good for you?
I absolutely love South Lakes. South Lakes, especially being in Reston, is full of many opportunities, and it has allowed me to do a lot of the things that, kids from other areas, they're not able to do. Like, for example, I absolutely love Black history especially, but I love political science and discussing current events. And so I am interning with the Fairfax Democrats in Falls Church. And so being in the Reston area, it makes it a little bit easier to, commute there, one, and then interact and be able to be a part of the actual campaign and the campaigning process and actually being out there and trying to get minorities to vote and interact in politics, I think is really, really invigorating and it's exciting. So I hope to continue that as well as international business in the future.
I mean, is it wonderful or what? That this is just an introduction. Yasmeen, tell us about your plans for next year.
Well, I have been accepted to Syracuse University in New York, so I'll be going there, hopefully to travel abroad and study other cultures. Also, I would like to study forensic science as well.
All right, do you feel included and socially and academically accepted at South Lakes?
I do. I first came to Reston area in my freshman year of high school. I did not know anybody or anything about this area. And the students and the teachers and staff there really helped me to get closer to other students, you know, make friends, make a lot of plans outside, join teams and activities and clubs.
Did they help you in selecting colleges and courses and things like that?
Yes, they did. Although colleges, it was more of on my own.
We understand that. You've been committed to getting everything in and getting it done. Marty, tell me, when did you come to Reston? And did Reston prepare you academically for your next step?
Let's see, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
My family first
Just
came to
move a little bit
Reston.
towards your mouth. Just a little bit. Yeah, that's good.
My family first came to Reston in, I think 1972.
71.
70.
Well, who's counting?
That is my mother there. So we came here in 71 and I was, you know, but an infant. So I grew up here, elementary school, middle school, and high school. I can recall my younger days in Reston. They were filled with fun, especially this time of year. When I was a child, we used to play in the lake. I know people used to tell us not to. But the lake would be frozen over for quite a long time, and we would play on Lake Ann. And I know growing up through high school, Lake Audubon and Lake Thoreau would freeze over, and we would build a hockey rink, and we would play. And it was things like that, which for me, as you know, a child, my family was from Chicago. They saw us as their country cousins. But these are the things that we were doing. We grew up more suburban. And my father, when choosing this place to live, Mr. Simon would be very happy because my father went on a tour of Europe when he was in school and fell in love with the Scandinavian countries. And he loved the architecture that was here. And then the other thing that brought us to Fairfax County was the schools. He wanted us to be able to go to the public schools. My sister was older than us, and she started at Lake Ann Elementary when they had no gymnasium. We go back that far. But going through middle school and high school, I feel as though I was very prepared. A lot of college level courses, even back then I graduated in 1988. Math, science, you know, all of the AP things.
Well, I think that Reston has done a good job academically, but talk to me a little bit about socially. After you left here and you went to college, how was that? Was that okay?
Well, I probably did not come to appreciate growing up in Reston to the full extent until I got to college. I went to the University of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
It was not Reston at all. I wanted to go to school out of state because I didn't want to go to school, Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, with people that were just like me. All of my high school friends, you know, were going to these schools. So I went to the University of Tennessee, and I got there, and it was very, very different. It definitely was not as diverse. In Reston, I grew up with friends that were Hispanic, that were Asian, that were black, that were white. When I got to Tennessee, for the most part, it was black and it was white. And there wasn't a lot of intermingling. And this was in 1988.
Well, let me go back just a minute, if I can ask Yasmeen and Asia, when you get ready to go to college, is the racial composition of the college important to you?
I believe so. I think it's important that you or anybody really has an understanding and awareness of other cultures and races.
That's interesting. Asia,
Get close, ladies. Get close.
I would agree, because I do have family in the country, like in the Halifax area or like Virginia area, and whenever I would visit and and try to hang out with like family members who were my age and their friends, they would always tell me that I talk different or I speak white, and so it always kind of worried me. I didn't really know what that meant, but as I started to grow up and I guess really become aware of like the different kind of, I guess, accents of what they consider Black people to sound like, it kind of made me realize that education kind of played a bigger role in that. So I guess like with me saying that, being able to like go different places and experience and see different people of different places is really important.
I want to ask one more question about this level before I go to Bob. What about income differences? There's a wide range of people with different income strata, say in Reston. Do your friends, are they on different levels, income levels, and do you think that's an advantage or not an advantage? Marty, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll work back. When you were in school?
Growing up in Reston, again, a credit to a vision that Mr. Simon had. I recall having friends that were lower income, middle income, and well off, and everybody played together. It was a wonderful thing, and for the most part, you didn't really notice these things. You were just friends. In high school, there were kids who got cars for their 16th birthday. They drove to school. I remember at South Lakes, our student parking lot was probably filled with nicer cars than the teacher parking lot.
I must say that's true. I'm still driving my 9.
And as it was, again, it didn't matter. The kids who got the cars would pile everybody in their cars. The other kids who worked and saved and bought cars would often drive other kids around. People would trade off, and I think one of the things that was a testament to the parents. I know many parents who were well off. Their kids had to work, and their kids had to buy their own gas, and if they couldn't buy their own gas, and they hopped in the car with the child, or another kid who had a car who bought the gas. So it was one of those things that, we were all really just close. Some of my best friends to this day are individuals that I grew up with in Reston.
Do you feel also that it's socially mixed?
Yes. Income does not matter. Still in South Lakes, people are still friendly with each other. Just like he said, hop into cars, go to Reston Town Center together. I mean, everybody's just friendly with each other.
Good. Did you find that as well?
Yeah, I agree. I have friends of many different income levels, and I guess it's really fun, especially when people are like, oh, let's have a sleepover, and like you get to like, especially like during basketball season, we always have like team parties and stuff. I remember my friend Diana Mazid, her house was humongous, so she gave us a big tour of her house. It was actually really, really cool. And so it's just like it's really fun to like experience like having friends of like different income levels to like, see like what their story is and like how they came to Reston and how they came to this area and stuff like that.
All right, I want to ask, the reason that all these children have had these experiences, excuse me, Marty, for calling you a kid. But the reason they've had all these experiences is because of some of the people who are in this room now. And particularly because of people like, not just Bob Simon, of course, but Bob Secundy as well. Bob Secundy came here a good while ago, and what I would like to do is ask Bob to talk about what it was like when he came here. And I'm going to ask you in the audience if you would think about questions that you would have for Bob or for any of our other panel members. Here you see the beginning of Reston, and Reston as it is today. And I would submit it's a little bit of wonderful for me to be here. Bob, tell us a little bit about why your family moved to Reston.
Absolutely. When I was
And what was its strengths and needs, and what political changes did you seek out, and did anybody help you?
I'm beginning to slowly answer those questions.
Yes, kind of move forward just a little bit, Bob, toward the microphone, if you could.
When I was in graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania,
We can't hear.
Can't move it toward it, just pick it up and move it toward it.
can you hear me now?
No.
Can
Okay.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh my God, Marty, I'm good. Okay, when I was in graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, I roomed with 8 architects. The reason I was enthusiastic about it because Louis Kahn, who was at the center of architecture in the world, imbibed to these students a lot of enthusiasm, which rubbed off on me, so I was very enthusiastic about architecture. And in a magazine, an architecture magazine, they described Reston. They said Reston now had the famous world design architects, and it had fair housing. At the time, African Americans could not get housing in the suburban areas. So I said, Lord, let's go see if we can find what's going on in Reston. Now, you must know that Reston was forever a long way away. I mean, a long way away. There were no roads, very difficult to get to. So as backup, I asked my cousin to come with me. And we came to Reston, and I think I had maybe 2 or 3 hours to drive at that time. And when we came to Reston, out of this oasis, what did we see? We saw this fountain coming up. We heard chamber music. We heard crickets. I said, my Lord, we're in paradise. We decided to move there. And what happened is the few black families began to get together, and they got together and slowly formed Reston Black Focus, sort of a way in which they could commiserate with each other. And that became a center where the political structure invited us always to come and talk. We had the years of the people at the Gulf Oil, Magnuson, Martha Penina, who was the board chairman, the police force. Every time anything happened, we were invited, so we knew what was going on ahead of time, and we had an input. They asked for me to take resumes. I used to take resumes because people wanted to put blacks on the various planning boards. So we were very well integrated in the community. And so what happened is that as we felt very so it looks like at that point, Robert Simon's dream was coming true. Blacks were working with whites. We were putting offices, industries in Reston, so you could really live in Reston and work in Reston. That's another dream. And also the community was around different associations, and the association had the ability to do cluster dues, so people came out and had to meet each other. So at that time, you could almost mark it and say, this was working, this is really fabulous. So then how do we communicate that to the other part of the world? And we decided to put on a Black Arts Festival. And that festival was publicized, let people know what was going on. It was in the newspapers, it was on television. And I think that served as a marker to say we have arrived in terms of this theoretical dream, which really worked. So it was very comfortable, and obviously I've enjoyed it and I've lived here ever since. Any questions?
Well, Bob, tell us, did you have any kind of issues around the politics?
I said there were no, when you say issues, if something came up, Reston Black Focus was on top of it. We could meet, we could make things happen. We were a core group. So politically, I think
We're getting ready to have a meeting, Bob.
There was the core group, they were, anytime there was a political issue, Reston Black Focus met with the power structure and got things changed. We were very strong, very organized, and I will tell you this, when I was in the house, the phone must have rang every 15 minutes. We were always meeting, always talking, always communicating, and
Yes.
always involved in the community.
One of the things that you might just, as an aside, and then I'm going to ask you to ask questions, was, this is a long time ago, and Bob Secundy will remember this. A child was in high school, and she had a couple of issues, but the teacher said something to her that was racially insensitive. Before the child came home, the entire community, Black community, was mobilized. I mean, the entire Black community was mobilized. And it made a huge difference. That teacher lost his job. And the Fairfax County Public Schools started to look seriously at how all children were being educated in the system. And it made it easier for a lot of people. All right, are there any questions out there? Yes, please.
Bob shared with us his experience in running for public
Wait a
office.
second, 1 second.
Bob shared with us his experience in running for public office in Fairfax County.
I ran for the House of Delegates. It's a 5-member district. And at the time, I didn't know it was revolutionary to be running. I mean, I didn't realize how hostile and how racist Virginia was at the time. And I think that paved the way. I didn't win, but I did well enough. I got enough votes. And I think I broke the way for a number of other people. I think Kathy gives me credit for helping pave the way for her to run.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, please, over here.
I guess in the early days, there were a lot of racial issues. You didn't really sink into them. You know, you made it seem like the black folks has cured everything, but there are a lot of, if not gangs, at least white groups and black groups that were on the plaza. The kids were pretty divided. It wasn't Embry and the Common Ground made sort of inroads into social integration. I'm wondering with the younger people though, what are there racial issues that you grew up with, or if not, what have been the chief issues you faced growing up in Reston?
Yes, Asia?
So when I was younger, there wasn't really many racial issues. I had friends of all ages. I stayed over with many different people of many different ethnicities. But as I got older, especially when the Trayvon Martin shootings happened, South Lakes really changed, and you really saw how people really felt. And I especially saw that the problems that were going on in the 60s were still going on today. And so for many projects that I did, I would do them on Black history, and I would try to educate people on Black history, especially something called Black Wall Street. I'm not sure if anybody ever heard of it, but no one had ever heard of Black Wall Street, and no one had ever heard of what the atrocities that happened there. Many Black people were killed, burned, and everything because of rape that there was no evidence behind. And some of the white kids in our school, I don't mean to be so vulgar, but they would make comments that were very rude, saying, discrimination doesn't exist. And so, especially being in political science, I would try to really make people aware of the issues that are still going on today, and that, with facts, that it really still does exist. So it's starting to die down again, yes, more, but it really opened up my eyes to I guess the difference between that there are still feelings there of that are racially charged, I guess you would say.
Yasmeen, what do you think?
It's not as big as it used to be, but it is still there. Social media, there are some people that still say some things that aren't very, nice or true. And it is a problem, but I mean, it doesn't really affect the community as much.
Marty? Oh, I'm sorry, Bob.
I'm going to ask Phil. Phil, I'm talking about between 67 and 69, 70. There were minimal, that I detected, racial, black-white problems that weren't addressed or smoothed down by Reston Black Focus. Now, after that, you're absolutely right, though, but I wasn't talking about that period. I was talking right at the beginning.
And my experience was that the black-white issue was more significant between people who lived in Herndon and the blacks who lived in Reston. And that was a significant thing. And remember, there were riots over in, or issues over at Herndon High School. And they were significant. They were significant. And everybody's got their personal story about that. But leave it to be said that within Reston, there was very little that my kids experienced. And we came here, I guess, in '67, and my kids went off to college, and whatever. It was not an issue.
The Black Sambo. Remember that incident of the Black Sambo?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember when there was a slave market at the on Lake Ann, and the Reston Black Focus dealt with that. Marty?
Well, I would say I was a child of the 70s.
Yes.
Lake Ann was our playground. It was not always the most peaceful amongst kids and amongst their parents during that time. And as you say, some of the disagreements were, as I can recall, between the blacks in Herndon, the blacks in Reston, where we grew up on Golden, and we had many friends there. My family, in fact, my mother would care for some of the kids there when they had some parental difficulties or what have you. And there were issues I know growing up and all through high school, and some of them have gone on and have had difficulty with the law or what have you. And I ran into a young, well, I say young man, he was younger than me, but we're not so young anymore. I ran into a gentleman over Christmas time in Falls Church, and he called me out by name, and he remembered me, and he remembered, coming over to our house. And, I know his older brother had some issues with jail and the fighting and things like that. And he was telling me how he's a father now, and he's married, and he's doing all of these things. And we talked about when we were younger in Reston, and he remembered how nice it was. And I jumped to the time and the era. And I remember when we were approaching 16 years old, and my mother gave my brother and I both a good piece of advice about the state that we lived in. And she told us, do not turn around in somebody's driveway. Go to a corner, make the turn, because they have the right to shoot if they feel threatened on their driveway. And if a young black man is on their driveway, and Reston was dark, it's still dark, so imagine it back then. And she, forewarned us about what could happen. I can also recall those difficult conversations in our house, because as I previously said, growing up, everybody was friends. But then you get to those times when some of your friends didn't come over to play with you at your house. And you also get to those times when there's a young girl that you were interested in and you wanted to go to a dance with, or you wanted to date, but you were not allowed to. And those things had to be explained. And yes, everything in Reston was not always bliss.
Right. All right, further questions? Yes, Ellie?
I want to say I'm very proud of the two students in South Lake. really happy to.
Sorry you didn't leave your hand up.
Thank you. Very proud of you. I think one thing that's important to say is that.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you. We're working on it.
Oh,
Right there.
Is that it?
There you go.
Help it in my mouth.
You're a rock star.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Can you hear me now?
It's not on.
I don't think it's on.
It's on. Let's try it.
Can you hear me now?
Sure.
I said, I want to say I'm very proud of the two seniors from South Lakes. You're doing very well, really proud of you. But one thing that I think is important to Reston, my husband, the late Rodney Smith, started Reston Black Focus. And he wanted to start he wanted to start this organization to make sure that Black lifestyle and culture not get lost in a new community. And we got together with white folks. Some white folk had never been near a Black person or lived near a Black person. So they would come to our house and we would go to their house and the kids would play with them. And I say that to say that it was funny because I retired from George Mason University and I had so many kids from Reston who went off to school, Black kids who went out of state to school, way out, sometimes Chicago, hour away, Nebraska, way out there. And they wanted to transfer back to Mason. They said because the white people out there were different from the ones in Reston. You see, in Reston, they could run in the house, and my husband, he had sensitivity, well, we called them sensitivity sessions then, with all the educators and all the, anybody who's interested in coming. So they would want to transfer to George Mason. I said, so why do you want to transfer out? You're doing well, aren't you? And it's because they said, the white folk out there, they're not like the white folk in Reston. We run in and out their house. We can't run in and out the house out there, So anyhow, I think that we have to give ourselves credit for Reston Black Focus. We laid a good foundation for community, for coming together. And I think during that time, the white folk, they were people. And we were people. So we had a wonderful beginning. I've been here for 40.
Long time.
Yeah, it has been long. I think
It's been a long time now.
About 46 years, I believe.
Yes.
No, I just wanted to.
I wanted to mention something. We're talking about how the white folks in Reston were different from the other white folks. I'd like to tell you one thing. I came and I was looking for a teaching job in this new school at South Lakes, and the man who was the principal of the school looked like what I used to call a redneck. I'm more sensitive now. I don't say those things. And he had hired a Black woman as a math teacher, and she was a fabulous math teacher. And I said, there's no need for me to interview, because he's not going to hire two Black women in the math department. I mean, first of all, women in that just wasn't going to work. This man's name was John Broadus. He was from Southern Virginia. He was as Southern Virginia as Southern could get, and he was a fabulous principal for all the kids and all the teachers in South Lakes. And I did go to work there, and I think that all of us who came to Reston and were willing learned a lot about other people and about ourselves, about the limitations we had and the, can I say, prejudices or biases that we carried that we didn't even know we carried. We thought that's the way it was. So it was a way of, Reston became a way of enlightenment for so many at different income levels, educational levels, social levels, and racial things too. Please.
I just wanted to say, my brother was part of the Black Focus, George Tolbert, and yes, yes, Dr. Tolbert, yeah. Anyway, he had decided that Reston was so wonderful. He moved from Washington to Reston, that he wanted his sisters out here. And so my husband and myself, and then my sister, Carlene Bodden, and her husband, moved here. And what I want to say is Black Focus opened the doors where if there was a problem, you could solve it without actually being a member. And my kids, before they came here, they had been in private schools, and we came to South Lakes. And one of the problems at South Lakes was that none of the Black students took AP courses, and they never celebrated Black history. And so I was astonished, and I got a group of folks together. They were Black and white. We went over, we talked to the principal, and then we met with the superintendent and insisted. The following year, a young man named McLeod, his son became the first president of the student body, and Black students began to go into the AP courses. So there are problems, and there are always going to be problems. No place is perfect, but you work through them, and I think that's the way it, it is. Even right now, if there's a problem, you just deal with it. But I just wanted that about the schools to be known.
I have one question for the students, and that is lunchtime, cafeteria. I know you say you have friends of all races and nationalities. What happens at lunchtime in the cafeteria?
So during lunchtime in the cafeteria, you see people sitting with people of all different races. Generally, I sit with my best friend Samantha, although she's mixed, she's Black and white. But I do sit I sit with people who are Indian, I sit with people who are African or Caribbean. Like my friend Aisha, I sit with a lot of different people of different races. But the majority of my friends are, or at least my closest friends, are Black. I do have really close white friends as well, but the majority of them are Black. But it's not really for racial reasons, just I guess we connect more, I guess.
I would have to say the same. I mean, I sit with Asia at lunch sometimes, and we have friends of different nationalities, so it just depends.
Yes? Excuse me, the man in the white shirt.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is that we lived here in 86 through 98. We went away to New Jersey. Interesting experience. And then we came back in 2007 and have been here ever since. We always loved Reston, but we had to move for job reasons. One of the things we noticed, you all talk about, oh, white people were, well, I don't know how cool we are, but we're just white people. But what we noticed was that Black kids, particularly the young people, we got to know them when we were here the first time. When we went into New Jersey, they weren't like that. They were more hesitant, they were more, circumspect, and just we came back to Reston, and one of the first times we sat in a restaurant and got waited on by a nice young Black man, and we said, and he just treated us like we were regular people. And, we treated him like regular people, and he had confidence, he was assured, he was comfortable, and I just said, we're back in Reston. It was a wonderful thing.
And you should know that for those of us who have worked in the school system, kids don't have a lot of information, but they're generally the smartest people in the world. They know when it's okay. They know when you're okay. They know when you're not okay. And they don't have to take an extra course, an AP course, to figure that out. It's just that's what God gives them to kind of help them know what to do and what not to do.
The other thing I wanted to ask was that I've known about Reston since the 60s. I wanted to know what was the key thing that encouraged Robert Simon to choose it to be fair housing, to choose it to be this integrated community. And I don't know if I want to ask this question personally, or how you want to do that.
I would love to say that in my cradle I had a vision and all that stuff.
Kids always.
But the simple fact is it never occurred to me to exclude anybody. It just didn't make any sense. So I didn't dwell on it. It was just, after I got started, I found out what it was like to be working in Virginia because I was a New Yorker. But that didn't stop the idea that it was unconscionable not to be an open society.
That's wonderful. Could we, oh, Linda, please.
This is not a question, but a comment. I think in those early days, though we had our, quote, black organizations, you know, you move to a place and you bring with you your life experiences, your culture, and so we did form, you know, the sororities and the other groups, the Jack and Jills, etc. But we also participated in the wider community. I was on the Fish Board of Trustees and president of the Fish Board of Trustees for a while. My husband was on the Architectural Review Board. Some of you others here participated in the larger community. And we had, in those early days, blacks who opened businesses. We had a temporary, what do you call it, employment agency that Meredith Holmes opened. We had a fish store at Hunter's Woods. Who were some of the other businesses? We had a bookstore. Eileen Welch had a bookstore at Hunter's Woods.
Popeyes? No, it wasn't Popeyes. What was that?
It was Popeyes.
It was Popeyes.
Was it Popeyes?
I can't think of the name, but
Monday.
Correct.
Sylvia
Yeah.
Munden.
Yeah, correct. So we contributed to the overall community in that way. Now, well, bringing it far up to date, we have Carol Bradley and others who've served on the Reston Community Center Board. So we're also involved with the wider community, and that opportunity and our presence there, I think, makes a difference. I joined this church 40-odd years ago, and you can obviously see that this is a predominantly white church, but I have been welcomed and nurtured here for these 40-odd years. So, you know, we're a part of the community as well.
Yes. Reverend Gill is here, and I think she's going to tell me that I need to sit down. But I have one question, and I'd like everybody to think about it. I think in general, we are happy with where we have gotten from the 60s till now. You should be proud and happy, and I'm certainly thrilled at the experience that the children have had. What should we be sure to keep for 2025? Look ahead 10 years. What do you want Reston to be in 2025? What should we be sure to keep? Marty, you're young, to me. What do you think? Name one thing that you want to be sure that we keep, or an attitude we want.
I would say the diversity of people.
Right.
And I think the diversity of people, it is racial, it's cultural, and it's economic.
Yes.
And in doing that, I think we need to be very cognizant of the affordability levels in Reston, so that we still maintain that housing diversity, which will give us the diversity of people. And Reston, well, I'll back up just one step and say, I think Fairfax County is a pretty inclusive and diverse place relative to the rest of the country. But when you get to Reston, it seems to be that much more inclusive.
Yes.
And it's just a spirit that Reston has within itself. That I hope it maintains that.
All right. Anyone else? Yes? Stand up and shout.
Okay, I really just want to second the diversity of the community. And I am concerned that in the year 2025, there might be less income diversity in the community. And I think that as a community, we need to be ever vigilant that the income diversity continues as it has, and that takes a lot of effort.
Yes.
It takes a lot of effort because we're talking about now market rate housing. And in Africa, we talk about affordable housing, but the only people who can afford the affordable housing are the government employees.
Right.
So that's a nice term, but when you look at the reality of it, it's not being, I don't think, as focused on as it should be now as it was in the 60s and 70s.
All right. Young people, what do you think?
I think we should keep the parks and the community places like the Reston Town Center, the pools, because it really brings everybody together, not just from Reston, but from Herndon, from the Fox Mill area. People come together, go to the pools and play, talk, socialize, see movies, go to dinner together. I think it's really important.
That's wonderful. Yes, Brenda?
I'm Brenda Irons-Lasan, and my family, we've been in Reston since 1973. And I always consider us the second wave of black folks to come to Reston. It was right after there was the Black Focus, and it was just around the time that all the sororities and Jack and Jill and other groups were developing that focused on African American or African American children. And again, what I loved about Reston was the diversity. And I love the fact that my daughter now at 35 and my son at 48, they don't say he's white or he's black when they describe their friends. And to me, that is a part of their experience in Reston. So I definitely want to keep the diversity. I hope it continues. But one of the things that really saddens me is the fact that young professional blacks, our children, are not coming back to Reston. They can't afford Reston. And it's changing the whole dynamics of Reston because we don't have the young middle class African Americans in Reston. And that's what really saddens me, and I do think it impacts on our whole diversity.
Anyone else? Thank you so much. Yes, Ellen?
One other thing that's very important is educationally that we get more diversity in the schools. We don't have a lot of diversity in the schools. And I have been to all the schools, I've worked in all the schools.
You mean the children or the staff?
The staff, I'm sorry, the staff. And the staff talks about that. So we need to work on getting more, not only blacks, but other nationalities, other cultures as well. But it's pretty sad now because we might have 2 in one school of 1,200 students, and that's not fair. So I'm tired, so somebody else can take that on.
I want to thank all of you so much. I think that our panel is wonderful, and you guys are wonderful, and I'm really glad my husband went out. This girl from the Bronx has learned a lot in Reston.
This has been wonderful dialogue. I'm not going to take up any time. We're going to show.
Don't we have to get up and about to show the video?
Yeah, we're going to have to make some arrangements. While we're doing that. This will be a short video of the African American Legacy, Reston's African American Legacy Program. And these are excerpts from the program, excerpts from those people who are members of United Christian Parish. We have done 31 interviews to date. We started in June of last year. I want to first of all thank Cheryl Fields, who was my recruiter and host for the United Christian Parish segment of the Reston African American Legacy series. And so we'll go right to the series. And I also want to thank Deanna Miller, who did this production.
Consequently, Reston became one of the most successful new town developments in the country. In a parallel universe, African Americans were experiencing a renaissance. Years of bloody and prayerful struggle produced the passage of the Civil Rights Bill, the Brown v. Board of Education decision, and that next year, the Voting Rights Act. Historically, black colleges and universities, as well as Ivy League and state universities, were graduating teachers, scientists, and business makers. Graduate schools were offering scholarships to qualified students, and affirmative action was opening previously closed doors in industry and government. Many were the first of their race to achieve such professional heights. Culturally and spiritually, African Americans were living through the decolonization of African nations and America's civil rights, black power, and Black is Beautiful movements. Emboldened by these life-transforming experiences, some gravitated toward the new town of Reston to rear their children. Bricks, mortar, and lakes were not enough for them. They wanted and needed to transplant their culture in this new hometown. They established churches, installed charter chapters of traditional black organizations, held cultural events, and banded together to enrich and sometimes protect their children's education. And now a new generation is following in the spirit of the pioneers. Reston's African American Legacy Program uplifts the accomplishments of the past, encourages the next generation, and celebrates the lives of those who are resting from their labors. African Americans have contributed to the rich fabric of what we know today as Reston. These individuals form Reston's African American legacy.
Is a labor of love. I have always wanted to document what it is African Americans have done in this community. You know, some of my other history is documenting African American women in Congress, in my first book that I wrote. In my second book, I wrote about African biblical women.
I read that book.
And I just continue to want to put forth the history that I'm familiar with, and making certain that people know the value that we've contributed to the world. And so I just see this as a small part of that. In my retirement, I decided, let me go ahead and do it.
Well, Bill, may I call you Bill?
You may.
The two of you were charter members of United Christian Parish. Tell us about United Christian Parish.
When we moved to Reston in 1968, it was not the United Christian Parish. It was the Redeemer United Methodist Church. There were plans floating around about forming some kind of a united church, which were based on a recommendation from the Council on Church Union, which had met in Washington, D.C. earlier. And that concept intrigued me. Additionally, we came to this area from a prior United Methodist Church, so the transition into the church was not any big deal. We came from a United Methodist Church and went to a United Methodist Church. The concept I spoke of intrigued me because I have, as a young adult, always had a curiosity about why churches had denominational names. I never understood why, if we all believed the same thing, why we had these names. So when I heard about this idea about forming a united church where all of these churches would come together and rather than compete, cooperate, it was intriguing to me. So those things were a part of why we became, eventually became a part of the Christian Parish. Additionally, the pastor at the United Methodist Church at that time was Bob Reagan, and Bob had a propensity for visiting every person wherever showed up in Reston. And he showed up, he was very warm, invited us to the church. It was very close, and there weren't that many churches in Reston at the time. So eventually we wound up joining the United Methodist Church, which eventually morphed into
United Christian Parish. Now, the United Christian Parish at this point, there are 4 denominations.
Yeah.
United Church of Christ, Presbyterian, Disciples of Christ, and United Methodist. Now, but before that, there were 5.
Yeah. The Presbyterians had 2 denominations involved.
So now, do you know now why there are different churches with different denominations? And I've been to seminary and I don't know.
I think a lot of it has to do with we human beings. We get dissatisfied with what someone else is espousing, and so we decide, well, we know something better, so we get a small group to follow us, and then off we go. And next thing you know, we've got a denomination going that we call Hokey Pokey, and there are Hokey Pokey and so on. I would just like to comment on the fact of the ecumenicalism that we are. Growing up, I grew up in Kentucky, and all of my friends were of different denominations. And I was raised a Baptist, so in the morning I went to the Baptist church with my mother. On the first and fourth Sundays, I went to the Methodist church with my friends because it was a traveling pastor who came. And then on the other Sundays, I went with my Presbyterian friends. But every Sunday night, we went to the Pentecostal church. I was all set for all of this.
Ecumenism 101.
I felt it was the most business-like activity that one could seek to affiliate with. I was with another service organization when I lived in California, and so I wanted something a little stronger than that, something that was not quite so much of a plaything, but something very serious. And so I got involved in Rotary, and I actually started working when I first came here, and didn't start Rotary for probably about a year or so, when I was invited to join Rotary by another man that was already in Rotary, and he worked for the printing office, you see. And I worked for the FAA in D.C.
Well, you worked for the FAA?
Yeah.
And what year was that?
I worked for a lot of government agencies, because I thought somebody had to save them.
Well, you're in the right place.
Living up to the middle name.
Well, that's what, but you didn't just join Rotary. You actually became a leader in Rotary. Were you the second African American to become a leader in Rotary in this
I was
district?
the second African American, yes.
You become
district governor.
District governor.
I became, and we called those people district governors. And I brought in another black leader, but he doesn't live in Reston. And very soon, we'll bring in the first black woman into Rotary.
Reston in about 1969, changing jobs from, I was working for Melpar, and I got a job with General Technologies Corporation that was located here in Reston. And this was my first introduction to Reston, and I fell in love with Reston because it reminded me of the college that I went to, which is Berea College, and it has, that took care of, had diversity as well as taking care of the environment. And so that's what Reston is about. And that's why I fell in love with it.
Well, now you are president and founder of Enviro Decision Systems LLC, right?
That's
and that's
right.
a consulting firm. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've done, because you started that firm in 2001, right? But
Yes.
before that, you had a long tenure working in the federal government. So talk a little bit about the work that you did as an African-American scientist.
Well, my first job was with Bell-Haynes, as I said, and after I graduated from Howard University as a chemist. And I worked also with the MITA Corporation. And finally, for the U.S. government, I came into the government at GS 16 level to take over assistant director for research for the Office of Water Research and Technology.
And this was
Department.
during the Carter administration, or what?
This was actually, I got my first job with the Board Administration.
Oh my goodness.
That's when I came into the government. It was under the Board Administration.
And you eventually spent some time right in Reston at the U.S. Geological Survey.
Yes, well, I moved to the USGS from downtown, from the Office of Water Research and Technology, and I worked in the Department of Interior. And then, after several years, moved to the U.S. Geological Survey.
So I was interested when you told me that, because I used to live not too far from the USGS, but what was it like? I mean, I imagine there weren't a whole lot of other African-American administrators at USGS when you came there. Is that the case?
I was the only one. I changed over to from the GS 16 level. I went into the senior executive service.
So,
I had a choice under the Carter administration.
We used to meet at the Southgate.
Oh, that was the early days.
That was the early days, yes. It's more like in 1978. But I went there. She invited me. They were just getting started, and I went and I loved it. And of course, as you can see, I stayed, and we grew so rapidly that we had to move from there to the community center. And from the community center, we brought in a full-time pastor, and we did some great things. I can remember in 1986, we had the Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, L. Douglas Wilder, to come up and speak with us. And it was wonderful because I knew him. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and going to high school, I used to pass by his office every day to and from school. And I knew him because he used to be very good friends with one of our neighbors. And so that was wonderful to see him to come up and I.
So now this church was the predecessor to Heritage?
Yes.
And Martin Luther King?
Oh, yes. We were Christian Community Fellowship Church first, and then we changed it to, once we moved from the community center, we built a church on Boxmore Road, and we named it, that's when we changed the name to Heritage Fellowship.
First, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me to appear on your show. It's quite an honor.
Well, we are the ones who are honored today.
But I'm delighted to talk about the Multicultural Festival. We just celebrated our 14th anniversary. And Margaret Boyd, who's a educator, retired educator, has lived in Reston for many, many years. She and I both were involved in Dr. Martin Luther King birthday celebration. And as a result of that celebration, there was a piece or a component of that program that we allowed individuals from different parts of the world or different countries to come and kind of talk about their experiences, where they came from, their cultural, their ethnic backgrounds. So as a result of that, it was sort of a spin-off. It was sort of a natural to have the Multicultural Festival. So that's how it began 14 years ago, and I'm just amazed that it's been 14 years.
So then when it first started, it happened in February, or January, February, and
well,
then you moved it to
no,
months,
it
or
was,
how did it?
the Dr. Martin Luther King is, of course, his birthday celebration, but it's always been in the summer. It's always been in September. Sometimes the weather was good, and sometimes the weather was not too good, but we still went forth with the festival. But it has really, really grown. It's just not a Reston event. It's sort of become a regional event of Northern Virginia and also Washington, D.C., and also Maryland. So we have people come from all over.
Well, one of the things, I've gone to the festival for a number of years, and I've been here for about 10 years, but first time I went, which was just a couple weeks ago, I noticed I had never seen the naturalization ceremony that happens, and I was like, wow, this is very, very cool. So tell me when that kind of got
This really started 4 years ago, and I think it's one of the highlights, or the I just can't think of the word really to describe how exciting it is to have people who come from different parts of the world, and they're so excited, and it sort of lulls you back to remember why we are so fortunate to live in such a country with so many opportunities for everyone. In fact, the last naturalization ceremony we had 25 individuals from 22 different countries. So it's really become the paramount and very much the highlight of the entire event. And they're all so excited to be sworn in. And the great thing also about them being sworn in, as soon as they're sworn in, then we also sign them up to be eligible to vote, which is so important. Because in a lot of countries, as you know, you don't have that ability or eligibility to vote.
Yeah. So I was involved, of course, in college with the sorority, and moving to Reston, again, I was active with my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, get that plug in. And for a while with the National Council of Negro Women, a founding member of Jack and Gill of America. So you see the Reston chapter. The Reston chapter, right, Reston chapter of all these. So you can see I'm a joiner. And I don't seek leadership positions, but you know, people kind of tap me and say, okay, you can be president. You know, so I've been president of 2 or 3 different my daughter will comment that I was always going to meetings, but that's the service part of my life, I guess. I enjoy giving back. There's a quote in the Bible, I think, that says, to whom much has been given, much is required. So I kind of take that to heart.
Now, did you come from a family where that was also?
I guess I got more from my dad. Then my mom was kind of a stay-at-home mom, and the family was the core of her existence. So from my dad, and the church. You know, the church teaches you service, and you get involved with the little children's programs, and I guess that's where my singing started too. I know you're going to ask.
Of course, I'm going to ask you about your singing. For those of you who are watching, you may recognize Linda because you've probably seen her in one of her many performances. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've been singing all my life. You've heard that before, but it's true. From the children's choir at church to the adult chancel choir that sang the anthems, to the gospel choir, to a college choir. And on my college campus, I sang with a doo-wop group. Remember those doo-wop groups? 4 guys and myself, and that was a good time. And I also sang with the jazz combo at college, and we sang, we played at sorority and fraternity dances. So singing all the time, and whatever. I love all kinds of music. So that's my passion, I guess you'd say.
Well, I was going to ask you because in addition to your singing, you have all this service to community. How have you been able to balance that intersection between your love for music and your drive to be a part of community service?
I guess along with working as a working mom, when we first came here, I was home for 10 years with the kids, then went back to work. But you find time for things that you want to do. You always find time. And the singing, of course, in the church choir always, and the community choir, Mosaic Harmony. But then always finding time to go to meetings with the sororities and the other organizations. You're doing work in the community. You're giving scholarships for youngsters. And that giving back attitude has always been there. So you carve out time. And then looking back now, I wonder, how did I work and raise kids and go to meetings and sing? But you do it. You know.
Yes, that's a story of my life.
But one more thing with the music I wanted to add, and sometimes I not really regret it, but I actually auditioned with Motown. A friend of mine in college knew someone at Motown and said, Linda, come in to audition. And I said, okay. So I auditioned. They liked my voice. And I think they really wanted to offer to groom me. You know how they groom the Supremes, the Marvelettes and all those. I think I was a junior in college, and I had to make the decision of my life, I guess, that I wanted to stay in school. and I wanted to finish college. And I said I could pick up the singing later. So I kind of said no to that. I was going to school at Michigan State University in Lansing, and of course this was a little town in Detroit. So I said no. And years later, when I see the Supremes and all these performers,
care for pets in their owners' homes. So the pets get to stay at home and the owners travel where they're comfortable. They have their bed and their toys and their favorite treats, and they can stay securely at home, and the owners come home knowing that they're well taken care of.
So how many people do you employ that would allow you to take care of so many homes?
Well, it's wonderful. I mean, we really hit the wave in '98 to give pet owners another option other than a kennel or maybe a neighbor. And so we started out, it was just the two of us. I think that magic number 7 came. We had 7 people, then like 15. And now we're very thankful to have close to 70 pet sitters now. We service all of Northern Virginia. And we really do take great pride in just giving people peace of mind when they go away, that their pets and their homes are being very well taken care of.
Well, you know what's ironic is I saw this picture of the two of them when they were little kids, and they had on these animal outfits for Halloween.
A lower level, and in one of the rooms, the spare rooms, they had like a little menagerie. I mean, the gerbils and the hamsters
and fish.
Yeah. And so I could see a budding interest in. We had cats at home, but I never knew it would blossom into this. And actually, when they announced they were starting, they done a very good job with our local company.
Right.
And we were going to start our own business. And my husband and I, and I'm sure Beth's parents said, what? You need this full-time, good-paying job.
And everything else, and you're going to do what?
In addition to your taking care of horses down in Florida, you've accumulated a very impressive list of accomplishments. PhD, college professor, author, international lecturer, research. What are you most proud of?
Well, that's kind of different. I love it. I don't say anything to anybody about it because it sounds so crazy. When I was taking physics, of course, the mathematics part was easy because I understood the mathematics, but I always saw physics as something that you could understand. And the first time I couldn't understand, I could understand it mathematically, but I didn't understand it as a physical idea. And that's when they said that space and time are the same. Now, it may not sound like it matters, but the conceptual framework of which we try to frame our view of physical reality determines how we attack the problems that we come up with. As a consequence, a young physicist by the name of Richard Feynman in the 50s, he suggested that we give time the natural role that it has in the direction of physical reality. I always saw myself as living in a giant three-dimensional motion picture, and the idea that time was like space just didn't make sense to me. So Feynman not only showed that when you allow time to have its right role in the framework of defining what physical reality looks like, it makes things much, much easier. The computations become easier. It's easier to understand what the physical processes are doing. An open problem, mathematically and physically, was there is no mathematical foundation for a giant three-dimensional motion picture in which time takes on the role of director. So, over the last 20 years, myself, along with some co-workers, we developed the mathematical foundations for that, and I consider that a major accomplishment. And it's a part of a book that's coming out later on next year.
Well, you also had something to do with the installation of the very first supercomputer at an HBCU, didn't you?
Yeah, that was a part of a separate problem.
Practical.
Yeah, practical. That's the engineering side.
A person who gave of himself generously, a person who had a welcome smile when he walked in the door. He made you feel like you were the most important person in the world. And so we're here to celebrate his life and to talk to some people who knew him well. Zachariah Haynes, his grandson, and Bill Jackson, a member of United Christian Parish, where Oscar was a member, along with his wife, who is the pastor of that church, Reverend Joan Bell-Haynes.
He was he always had a good smile. Always smiled wherever he was. Never had a downside. Always looked on the positive side. He was a reporter. He reported on the Tuskegee Airmen and during World War II while he was a reporter. And he gave me this shirt, which I wear every week I can and every time I can.
That shirt had red tails on it.
Yes.
Do you know who the red tails were?
Yes, they were Tuskegee. They were African American pilots who were in World War II.
That's right.
We learned a lot from each other. He taught me the Bible, about Jeremiah, God, Jesus, everybody like that. He was a person you could have a good conversation with about anything.
That's so true. That's so true. If you started talking about spirituals, he could tell you the history of the Negro spiritual. He could tell you anything, and it was just right off the top of right at the top of his tongue. And so now, any response, any questions? Thank you for this opportunity. And these are the people that you sat next to on Sunday here at United Christian Parish. I hope you learned a little more about them. I hope you recognize how much they contributed to the life of this community and who they are. Sometimes we can sit next to people and not know that they were almost Motown stars.
I just have one question. I am so glad, not a comment, I'm so glad I came this evening. This is just fabulous. Thank you.
I have no famous last words. The only thing I can say is thank you for being in Reston. As you look around, this is what I love about Reston. They're old, they're young. They're every income, every educational range, many different philosophies, but we're all here for each other. Thank you, Bob. Sorry. Have a lovely evening. They're refreshments.
Are you going to send me some more names?
Yeah, I look back to you guys.